Hi, I'm Dana and welcome to another episode of Learning to be Autistic. I started this series as a little way for me as a late diagnosed autistic person to sort of talk through things and figure things out, get other people's opinions on things, just get to grips with myself as a late diagnosed autistic person. And hopefully it helps out some other people along the way. I don't know. It's been working for me, so I'll link the first episode over here if you haven't already seen it. And I want to get into today's video. I don't like long intros. So today I want to go down the route of the things you notice about childhood that very clearly pointed out that you were autistic, but everyone just sort of ignored. I have so many things from my childhood where I'm just like, that's autism, and everyone knew about it and just no one said anything. So I thought today'd be a fun day to bring it all up. So my first one is the way that I organise sweets. It sounds really bizarre, but any sort of sweet that you get in like different colours or shapes, as a child I would have to empty out the whole bag and organise everything into like the colour or shape, and that's all very well and good when you've got like some Smarties or some M&Ms, that kind of thing. I'd sort it all into the colours, and then it's whichever colour has the least gets eaten first, going up until you're eating the colour that's got the most of the bag, Like, it's really bizarre, and I'd be sat there at the dining table or at the living room table having tipped out the whole bag and organised everything, and if someone was like, can I have one? I'd be like, yeah, but you have to have one of like the orange ones because there's only 3 of them and there's 4 pink ones and there's more of all the others, so you can have one of them, but you cannot choose any other colour, it has to be one of those ones. And that was how I always ate those types of sweets as a child. Wine gums, the whole, any sort of thing that I could organise and then eat in that order, that was how I did it. And my parents were fully aware of that and just left me to it. Which, I didn't want them to stop me. But if my kid was doing that, I'd be like, well, it's OCD, anxiety or autism really, this, isn't it? Like, something's going on. And a slightly similar one, because my parents supported this, but I was a gigantic collector as a kid. And I think a lot of children are. I think a lot of children collect things. It's not necessarily an autism thing. But I collected weird things to an extreme degree. My most normal collection at that time was VHS tapes, because they were still kind of in currency. I'm talking like 2005, 2006. So they'd not long sort of started dying off. And my bedroom was essentially, you'd walk in, turn to the right, there's just 4 wall-length shelves of videotapes. Just any type of movie I could get my hands on, any TV show, any of it. I loved videotapes. Obviously it's that I really enjoy media. I get really obsessed with different forms of media. But also just having them all there and being able to look at them. But it got progressively weirder from there, because my next one, and this was all at the same time, this wasn't throughout my childhood. I had 3 separate collections going on at once. The other was teddy bears, and not nice cuddly teddy bears for a child. Those little China bears that your nana has. Loved them. Absolutely lived for them. I didn't have loads and loads and loads, but I had a lot. So my dad built me a little shelf at the end of my bed, and every single night before I went to sleep I'd make sure they were all lined up properly. Okay, I love you all, good night. I really loved those bears. And anytime we were out in a charity shop and I spotted one, I'd be like, parents, I can't leave until I own this. This has to be a part of my collection. And sometimes I'd get the same one twice if I especially liked it, which is, I think that's definitely an autism thing. And my parents were just like, yeah, she collects bears. And also China dolls. Okay, it blows my mind. I don't know how I slept in my bedroom as a child, because if you put me back in that exact bedroom now, I could not. Because as well as my one wall of shelves for my VHS tapes, I had a shelf that went all the way along the top of the room, about 1.5 foot down from the ceiling. And along that was all of my China dolls. The entire room, near the ceiling, was just lined with China dolls. And like I say, I don't know what my thing was with them, I'll be completely honest with you. I think it was that I already really liked vintagey stuff. I really liked the ones that looked very Victorian, I suppose, the pretty ones. And I didn't have any friends, so I spent quite a lot of time talking to them. But yeah, it would terrify me now, it would absolutely petrify me. Yeah, my parents just let me collect all this stuff and did not say anything, and now I'm just like, that's autism, I see it there. And like I say, I think a lot of children collect things. I'm not saying if your kid's collecting something, they are autistic, but I definitely think alongside the other stuff, it was a sign. Next up, it's kind of the whole way that I was treated in primary school, but especially being given private or quiet time, I could not stand being around other children. It was really difficult for me to be around other children, and teachers picked up on that. And my mum worked within the school, so she was fully aware of everything that was going on with me. And I didn't have to do break time and everything with the other kids. Like, to the point where most of my classrooms in primary school had like a little coat room outside where you'd leave like your bag and your coat. And for me, it used to be like the medical room. It had a shower and stuff in it, but it wasn't used anymore. And it had this like big metal shelf. And I got to go in there and leave my stuff in there. Both so that other kids couldn't steal it on me. And also because I couldn't cope with all like the rush to get out and everything at break time and home time. Like when everyone's run out and like grabbing coats and grabbing bags, it was so much for me. So I was allowed my little like private quiet space. And alongside that, I didn't like being out in the playground at break times because I didn't really know what to do. I didn't really have friends. I didn't know who to talk to or where to go or what to do. And a lot of the time teachers find me like really upset, just like hyperventilating somewhere. So after that, for several years in primary school, I was allowed to just go and sit in the library over break time. So I'd pop off and get my lunchbox, and then I'd pop off to the library and read a book while I sat and ate. And like, if that ain't straight up accommodating to autism, I don't know what is, frankly. And a similar one is that after my mum stopped working at the school I went to, she started working at a school that was for special needs children. And sometimes I'd have to go to her like before or after school and like hang out with them for a bit until I went to my school. And of course, being at a school for people with special needs, they had a sensory room that was like all nice lighting and bits of music and like lots of soft things to lay on. And I just spent hours in there. I loved that room. Like, my mum would have to pry me out of that room. And the fact that this was a room that was basically made for autistic kids, like obviously kids with other neurodivergencies and special needs went in there, but it was basically an autism sensory room, and I absolutely loved it and wanted to live in it. And my mum, who was working with autistic children, just didn't pick up on anything. I've actually done all these points to link into each other quite well. I'm quite proud of myself. It was unintentional, but I did it. And the next one is that I related really well to other neurodivergent kids. Obviously, I didn't know I was a neurodivergent kid, but I went to a lot of things like, because my mum worked with special needs kids, so I'd be around those in the school, and I got on really well with them. And my older brother was diagnosed Asperger as, I think he was a 4 or 5 year old. So I got to go to lots of things like young carers and like centres for special needs kids and things like that. And I loved it because these kids didn't pick on me. These kids didn't bully me and exclude me and treat me like shit. These kids, I'd go in and be like, oh, what are you playing? Can I play with you? And they'd let me. And I'd get to play with people and make friends. And not once did my mum think, hey, I'll come. She only gets on with the autistic kids. Like, how come it's only the kids with like autism or ADHD or something else like that my daughter gets on with, and she cannot function in school? Why is that? But yeah, I just had a much better time around kids that were considered to have special needs or considered to be disabled or were special needs or disabled. I'm not really sure of the terminology, and I'm trying my best to not be an offensive asshole. So the next one. Oh, these kind of stop tying into each other. I wish I'd mentioned that now. But I was very talkative and dramatic at home. I could go on for hours and hours and hours, and still can, about Doctor Who and Lord of the Rings and the things I enjoyed, and dinosaurs. Oh, I love dinosaurs and ancient Egypt. You know, I had all of these constant interests and things that I was thinking about and things I was passionate about, and I could just go on and on and on about them. And the second we left the house, I shut the fuck up. I hated and still really hate the idea of people overhearing me or me being perceived by anyone. You know, it's not a safe space anymore once I left the house as a kid and now. So I just stopped talking as soon as we went out. And my mum always found it a little bit odd, I think, because she'd be like, why aren't you talking to such and such out in the street? You always talk to me at home and now you can't talk to my friends. And I'd just hide behind her and refuse to say anything. I remember situations better than I remember like emotions or how I felt in a moment. So I don't know if it was like selective mutism and not really just anxiety or just not feeling so safe. I think it was probably selective mutism. I don't know for sure though. But I really hated speaking to strangers. And especially as a kid, I considered strangers to be anyone I don't see on a regular basis. My mum's friends, my mum's work colleagues, people like out and about. I would not talk to them, I would refuse. I would just hide behind my mum and wait for us to go. And that went for like doctor's appointments, you know, my mum would be like, do you want to tell the doctor what's wrong with you? And I'd just sit there until she did it. I'm not talking to them, mum. Nah. You know, I think it's common for kids to be shy around new people and everything, but it was a case of like, we'd see family for the first time in 6 months. I wouldn't talk to them. The friend that mum had stay over that time, that was here for like 3 days, that I absolutely adored, well, they haven't been here for a while. I'm not talking to them now. They've got to rebuild that bond, haven't they? And it was such an extreme difference from how I was when it was just me with my family at home versus like in other places or with other people. It was a very, very dramatic difference. And I can see now that it was a very early attempt at masking and not doing it well and not knowing how to do it or what to do because I was a little kid. However, despite being a little kid, my reading level and like my academic achievements were really, really high. In primary school, oh bless you, Jodie. In primary school, I was so fucking smart. So smart. Everything was easy. Everything was easy. I'd read near enough every book in my school library. We'd get given tests and whatever else, and I'd just sort of do them and get a decent score, even if I hadn't like thought about it. You know, everything was just really simple and easy. It was amazing. I was in all the top sets, I did really well, and I didn't really have to struggle with very much. And that fell apart very quickly following like leaving primary school because like we moved to Denmark, so I didn't really get a very great education because I was trying to learn Danish, and everything became a mess after that point. I never achieved again. But for a good few years, I was considered like smart as fuck. Like I was the mini professor. I was getting shit done, you know. I was so smart. And I feel like that's just the pipeline, isn't it? Oh, bye, Oti. That's such a common experience for autistic people, and it really sucks. And it's one of the few that, like, looking back, I don't feel like anyone should have noticed like this as an autism trait, because why would you? Like, I'm just a kid that is doing my schoolwork. But looking back with the knowledge that I have now, I'm like, that's the autism right there once again. And finally, this ties in a bit before, but my obsessions and special interests, as I now prefer to call them, my little special interests. But as a kid, it was just, oh shit, our daughter's obsessed with this thing now. She's obsessed with it and she won't shut up about it. And everywhere we go, she's like talking about it or relating things back to it or trying to like make us buy things that relate to it. It was just constant, and it really annoyed my parents. It especially annoyed my dad because he didn't like any of the stuff that I liked. Like, at least with my mum, we could bond a bit over like Doctor Who, and I had a big fairy trend as a kid. I was really into fairies. I was like, I'm gonna find them. I'm gonna be the bitch that discovers fairies and shows you that these tiny people wings are real. Never saw any. But yeah, some of the obsessions that I had as a kid, I could bond with my mum through, and it was really, really nice. And I don't think she fully understood why I was so obsessed with things, or like, you know, she didn't get it, as she wouldn't. But I was just so into stuff. And I'm really glad that for the most part, my mum encouraged it. Like, I'm never sure how much to include, like, as childhood, because I really, not to be depressing, but I feel like my childhood ended at the age of, like, 12. But, like, when I was, like, 13, 14, I was obsessed with Sweeney Todd, and I'd watch it literally every morning before school and every night after school and sometimes in the evening before bed. And my mum just fucking went with it. Like, she was an absolute trooper. But yeah, I'm really, really glad that my parents, like, at least my mum mostly, both my parents really, but mostly my mum, allowed me to indulge in those special interests, and they let me just be a weirdo, you know? Like, when I got into Zorro and was like, Mum, I need you to sew me a cape, I need a little eyepiece, and I'm gonna run around with this plastic sword, my mum was like, okay, we gonna make you the best Zorro there's ever been. You know, there was no like, oh, well, that's for boys, or like, don't you think you should like something else, or no, I'm not fueling this weird obsession you have with Antonio Banderas as Zorro. There was none of that. There was just, yeah, well, I'll sort that out for you. Give me a few days because I'm in work, but like, I'll sort it. That was the kind of person my mum was, you know? But if my kid had these like extreme obsessions where like it's clearly all they think about because it's all they're talking about, I would definitely assume it to be an autistic trait, personally. But I'm not a doctor. I don't know anything. So yeah, that's a slightly rambly 8 different things that like I would view as autistic traits in my childhood. And I've tried to go for the ones that aren't super common. Some of them are, but for the most part, I think they're sort of ones that people will relate to without it being like what doctors are looking for, what a neurotypical looks for when they think of a child with autism. You know, it's not just I walked on my tiptoes and spoke early, or I walked on my tiptoes and spoke really late. You know, like, that's all very well and good, but I think especially for those of us that are late diagnosed, it's important to be able to look back at the childhood we remember and our point of view of it and be able to see the autistic traits, because I don't know about anyone else, but even with my diagnosis, I get a lot of imposter syndrome. You know, I have every now and again, I'm just like, God, how embarrassing would it be if it turned out I'm not actually autistic? And I'd like announce to my YouTube channel full of autistic people, like, hi, I've been faking it, I'm not actually one of you. But then it's a case of, well, number one, I've got my diagnosis, so that's quite settled. But also, I can go back and see all of these like autistic things I was doing, you know? So next time you've got imposter syndrome, if that happens to you, even if you're not diagnosed, just look back on your childhood and be like, oh crap, I was one hell of an autistic little kid. But yeah, that's me done for today. Whoever you are and wherever you are, I hope you're having a lovely morning, evening, afternoon, day, week, month, year. And I'll see you again in a few days.